Welcome to the Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast, where we talk all things Panther City Lacrosse Club. Now here are your hosts, Nicholas and Andy.
Well, with the NLL season over, it's time to look back on the year that was the 2022-2023 season for Panther City Lacrosse Club. Welcome, everyone. This is the Cowtown Cats Lacrosse Podcast. I'm Nicholas, joined by Andy.
Hello, hello.
Andy, it's been a few weeks since we last talked about lacrosse. How things been going, and what you been up to since then?
I've been going all right. Doing some gardening with the Texas heat warming up a little bit. Trying to fill my Panther City void with some of the playoff games that had been happening since the quarterfinals, and you know they're fun and exciting, but it's just not the same as cheering for the hometown group.
Right. Well, and obviously we don't have any local teams in the playoffs anymore after the Dallas Stars kind of got knocked off by the team I was going for, Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL. So that's what I've been paying attention to. I actually got a chance to go to a couple of games during that series, which I'm not going to say I single-handedly helped that team, but both the games I went to, Vegas won 4-0 on one, and then 6-0 on the other. So I don't know.
Give yourself a little credit. I'll on behalf of the Metroplex, I'll begrudgingly give you a little credit.
Begrudgingly give me a little credit. I'll take it. But yeah, so I mean, obviously we're both good sports fans in other sports, and so we're here back again for Panther City side of things. And we're gonna take this episode to do a few things. We're gonna kind of do a quick rundown of the season. Talk about kind of the ups and downs that we went through the 2022-2023 season. And then obviously, like I mentioned at the beginning, the NLL had their own awards that they presented this last week and a half. Well, hey, Panther City has its own awards. I mean, they probably have their own through themselves, but we decided to crown some awards ourselves. But first of all, I mean, starting with the year as a whole, at the beginning of the year, we both had our expectations. Not our expectations just as a season, but our expectation as record. And honestly, between the both of us, we were pretty much spot on. You guessed 9-9, I guessed 12-6. Panther City ended up at 10-8. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say they did a little bit better than I expected, but I figured that inconsistency would still be an issue throughout because, hey, this is a young team. They haven't been around that long. The infrastructure isn't quite there. Obviously, Coach TK, reigning Coach of the Year, did a great job in helping the team take a bit of a pretty big step, considering they went from 7-9 to making the playoffs this year. So all in all, I was pleasantly surprised because I think I said 9-9.
Yeah, 9-9 at 500 mark for you.
Yeah, they might sneak in, but who knows? It's a tough conference and everything. And lo and behold, they did. So yeah, it was great to see their growth throughout the year.
Well, and speaking about the year, I mean, it started off kind of in an interesting way. 2 games right off the bat against the newest expansion, Las Vegas Desert Dogs. We kind of figured those games would be wins. Obviously, the first one was a little bit harder of a win for us, and the second one ended up being kind of a more of a blowout. But I mean, right off the bat, we started the season in the winning way with 2 wins right against Las Vegas.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny how that worked out. How the home game for us was a bit scarier. From what I remember, didn't Las Vegas score the very first goal?
Oh yeah.
Not
like 2 like a minute in, I think.
Yeah, it was barely a minute in, but then in their home game, where you thought, oh gosh, we might actually be in trouble against these newbies. We beat them pretty badly, 9-3. So that was a great thing to start off. And I think having that 2-win, that little buffer, helped us out throughout the year as we went through those peaks and valleys.
Well, and I think it helped us out in the end, securing that spot a little bit better. Because the next 3 games after that, I mean, we were at home against Colorado. That was a close loss, 12-9, and then started our 5-game road trip where we both had hoped we would escape 3-2. Unfortunately, we did go 2-3, but along those lines was a bad loss at Saskatchewan, Rochester, where we got pretty much blown out to the point of our poor goalie Nick Damude getting pulled.
Yes.
But it was after those three losses that we really felt like, okay, we need to get back into the thick of things, and that came in the form of a win against the Philadelphia Wings.
Yeah, that was I really feel like that was the turning point in terms of, yeah, it was a close game against a team that wasn't exactly in the playoff hunt later on in the season, but it was on the road and we were down by, I believe, 5 goals that game before coming back pretty late with like a minute to go. And things went on from there. We beat Vancouver the next week pretty handily, 20-7. I think that was our record
Mhm.
points scored for this season, probably for both seasons.
Right, and even with those two wins, I mean, you talked about it. I mean, we talked about when the game happened with that game against Philadelphia. That was a really good learning point for the team of how to like come back, especially multiple goals down, and get close to tying it up, and then eventually winning it. And then, of course, like you said, Vancouver turned out really good for us. And then came our really big test against San Diego, which again, we talked about it before, but at that point we had some people out with injuries, and we weren't too sure if we would it would be a good game or not. And it actually ended up being a really close game for us. We only lost 12-10, but we were in the thick of things most of that game.
Yeah, yeah. From what I remember, Caputo was out and Crawford. We had just traded for him,
Mhm.
I believe, and so either that or he wasn't on the squad yet. So yeah, we were a bit undermanned, and the fact that I think we were down for most of that game, but the fact that we were able to narrow the lead to 1 goal and only ended up losing by two, it was a pretty good test against who was considered at that time probably the best team in the league, certainly out west.
Right. And so, I mean, it really helped the team, I think, kind of feel like, okay, hey, we can stay in the thick of things as far as not only in standings, but in that playoff push. Because at that halfway point, we got another win against Vancouver back at home that put us at 5-4. And then it was a very much just a back and forth kind of second half of the year. Starting with a big Colorado Mammoth win at home, 13-7, which everybody will remember just because it was a massive brawl at the end of that game.
Yep, fist fights galore. Oh my gosh.
Right. And then we turned right around and faced Colorado in Colorado and lost that game 14-12. But it was just at that point it just kind of felt like we had good footing on how our offense and defense and everything should be flowing together during the game, but we would just kind of make 5 steps forward and then 2 steps back because we'd make that loss and then we would get a win against Saskatchewan, another win against Las Vegas, and then here comes San Diego, another at that point with a very winning record at that point, and we get a huge loss against them at home.
Yeah, and that was probably the most disappointing loss of the season because yeah, San Diego's a great team, but you want to show out against them, especially on your home turf, given how much we tested them in California. So yeah, there was a lot of. I think the longest win streak that we had was two wins, and that's
Hmm.
something that you're hoping for next year. We're able to build upon, hopefully with a bit more continuity.
Right, and again, I'll remember that San Diego game because I think you brought somebody to the game and
Yeah,
I
I
brought
brought
some
a friend.
people, and so we're like, well, it's either going to go one way or the other. We're either going to keep it close or it's going to be a blowout.
Yeah.
But you know what? We bounced back from that with a win against Albany at home. We go on the road against Calgary, which again at that point we had felt like might be our playoff opponent. So we were like, okay, well, we're at Calgary. This will be a good testing point, especially at that point because we were the game of the week. And
Yes.
unfortunately, that was not a good game for us at all.
No, yeah, they more than doubled their score on us, and that would have been nice because I think we might not have necessarily flip-flopped with them in the standings, but I think we would have been tied with them record-wise had we beaten them.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and again, that's a big momentum swing there too. If you can go into a place against somebody who you know is playoff bound and get a win like that, that would have been had a lot of heads turning towards Panther City's way. But we come back home, or not, we didn't come back home yet. Actually, we got a win against Vancouver that next week because it was almost a must win to guarantee our playoff spot. That was actually a really good showing by the offense and defense that game. We won 9-8. And then, of course, the last game of the year was against Calgary at home. We where both starters uh, started the game, and we only lost 13-12 going into the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great test. And we did have, even though we didn't end up winning, we did have, I think, a pretty sizable lead on Calgary throughout the first half. Of course, Calgary's a bit more battle tested and experienced with us. They had the eventual MVP winner in Del Bianco in net. So they put together the stops that it took to beat us. But it was good in that it showed us, all right, we can hang with these elite teams when we're focused and everyone's clicking together.
Oh yeah, and so ended the season 10-8. That was enough to secure the three seed, right above Colorado Mammoth, who are again in the finals this year. Um, but that we knew who our opponent was, or we figured out who our opponent was. There was some other things that could have happened in the last week of the NLL, just with those extra games, but we kind of had a good idea. It'll probably be Calgary unless something crazy happens. And so that set up our Western Conference quarterfinal game against the Calgary Roughnecks, where, we were both there at the watch party. I honestly feel like it was a good game by us. We just couldn't keep it going the full time of the game.
Yeah. Right when we went off the bat with that early 3-1 lead, there was so much momentum at the watch party and the energy was great. And you could tell that the team was, they obviously didn't feel what we were feeling being in Canada, but they were obviously motivated and saw a chance. But I think I don't want to say they lost their focus per se, as much as Calgary woke up. And after that first quarter, they really played us tough throughout. We were able to come back in the fourth a bit, but by then, of course, the clock keeps running, time runs out. It was a little too late. And you could tell the guys are beat up by it, but at the same time, the way they were able to fight back was really impressive, especially in the first playoff game for a lot of these players.
Right, right. And so, unfortunately ending the season like that with a playoff loss isn't always what you have in mind, but honestly, I think it was really good for Panther City. I think, we talked about expectations a few minutes ago as far as the season goes. Uh, they met my expectations, and I think more so than I had initially. Even though I had them winning 12 games, like having some of those showings in some of those games, I thought was a lot better than what I expected.
And it's so funny that I predicted them to go 500 and you predicted them to go 12-6 because I feel like just thinking about our previous episodes, I was usually the optimist and you were
Right.
usually like, oh, I don't think they're going to get this one or it's going to be kind of tight. But yeah, if anything, for Panther City and the league as a whole, the entire season showed how important consistency is and
Hmm.
being able to establish that chemistry earlier. I remember when we played Rochester, Rochester was, I think, the best team in the league at that point, even above Buffalo and Toronto
Hmm.
out east. And of course, they killed us, but then they ended up finishing the season with, I don't remember how many losses in a row, and just kind of falling out of that top spot. Meanwhile, you have Colorado on the other side, who they looked a little dead in the water for a while and then just ran off wins. Not just them, Georgia too. Georgia started what 0-7,
Hmm.
and they almost squeaked into the playoffs. So it's just every single game matters when there's only 16 in the season, 16 or 18.
Right, right. Well, and it just goes to talk about like you said, consistency. You talked about that Rochester Nighthawks team. I mean, they barely squeaked into the playoffs. Their last spot was up to between them and Georgia, and Georgia almost snuck in. And then their first game was against Buffalo, and they got blown out of that game. So
Right.
it's really hard to tell, especially early on in the season, where teams are. But I think like you said, it kind of goes to, just there does need to be some consistency.
Hmm.
Very much like I said, the second half of the season was very back and forth. We'd have one good game, and then the next one it would be really bad. We'd fixed a few things from one game, and then the next game we'd have all these new mistakes that we didn't have the game before. And
Hmm.
so it's just learning from that and trying to correct those and stay on top of those. And I think because the team had so many changes. I mean, for goodness sakes, we had Jake Fox for what 3 weeks, and then we
Yeah.
traded him back out. So there was a lot of just moving parts this season, and that happens with a young team a lot. They're trying to find kind of their identity a little bit more, but it feels like once Crawford got in there and started learning the system, and everybody got comfortable with each other, things were a little bit better down on that end.
Yeah, the offense definitely seemed to click more once Callum was there. He wouldn't even necessarily score a ton of points or have a ton of goals, but just his presence and the threat of having that veteran who's accomplished so much on the offensive side during his long career just took a lot of the pressure off of guys like John Donville in his rookie year, Will Malcolm, Phil Caputo, to where it was definitely a more balanced effort than it might have been near the beginning of the season.
Well, and speaking of just things changing as well, I mean, things changed on the defense too. Losing some key players on that side.
Hmm. Yeah. And you had brought up Jake Fox earlier. I felt like the trade of who was the captain at the time, Chad Cummings,
Hmm.
for Jake Fox ended up being somewhat underwhelming because they traded away the team captain, who was a solid veteran defender, for a player who didn't gel in limited minutes for whatever reason, whether it was because he wasn't getting enough time or there was a bit of repetition, or who knows. I think we spoke before about how I suspected that trade might have gone down before the team knew they had an opportunity to get someone of Callum Crawford's
Right.
caliber. So, but in any case, that was a pretty high price for a player who we only had for what seemed like a month at most.
Well, that and then Liam Burns. I mean,
Yes.
when his trade happened, I think the next game it was one of the games that we were really bad defensively because we couldn't make those adjustments.
Yeah, and you try to patch up and fill. It's based. You need to have a next man up mentality, but Burns was definitely one of the defensive leaders as well. Another great, hard nosed, physical veteran presence, and it's weird. Like I can understand from an front office perspective why you'd want to keep your future draft capital in a good place to get these good young players that are going pro. At the same time, the front office also seemed to have a bit of a strategy of like, okay, the best, quickest way to get people in the seats is to win. And in order to win, you're probably going to have better luck with guys that are a bit more battle tested than a bunch of young guys.
Right, right. And you can say what you will. I mean, there might be a slight disconnect there. I think again, towards the end of the season, things started to the team started to figure stuff out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely just with all those moving pieces in the middle section, really kind of threw off, and you can tell throughout the team as a whole. But yeah, I hope that next year we can learn from this year even more and have those improvements and have those, more consistent play from both the offense and defense. But the year overall was a success. Hats off to Panther City for not only getting into the playoffs, but making it a really good game up in Calgary, which us as fans is always a good sign of things going in the right direction.
Yeah. And one thing I will add on to that, yes, there was inconsistency, but as weird as it sounds, I think a silver lining of that was we were consistent in our inconsistency, if that makes any sense. Whereas other teams had really high highs and really low lows. We were pretty steady the entire season. Yeah, we would make mistakes from individual game to game, but nothing snowballed into something insurmountable that put us out of playoff contention. So props to Coach TK, Steve Toll, rest of the staff, as well as the players for being able to weather the storm.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's as we saw with Georgia, at the beginning of the year, I think they started what 0-7 or
Yeah,
0-8.
we were feeling bad for our old buddy Jeremy Thompson out there.
Yeah, but they got things back on track, and that's a good testament for them. But well, of course, all year we had Mr. Andrew and his stats of the game. Well, with the end of the year comes his stats of the year. Mr. Andrew, what are your stats of the year for the year of the 2022-2023 season?
I'm going to take more of a top view approach with this. One thing that I liked paying attention to throughout the season was the goal differential between teams. I think a team like Calgary had a really good goal differential, and then there were other teams that might have been considered elite, whereas a bit closer than a bit too close to be really comfortable, even if the record was really good. In our case, Panther City scored 204 goals this year and had 193 goals scored against them. So that's less than double digits. It's I'd say a little bit too close for comfort, but it definitely showed growth compared to where we were last year. I don't know what the differential was, but I can assure you it was in the red. Along with that, we had a very balanced attack on offense. No player scored more than 35 goals. Will Malcolm led the team with 35. However, we had plenty of players score over 20. Josh Medeiros, in transitions, had more than 20. Really impressive. Patrick Dodds, he had to get used to a different role, playing more off-ball, what with the emergence and drafting of Donville coming to the team. Phil Caputo, I believe Caputo led the team in goals last season, yet this year he also was playing a bit more of a supplementary role, and where he really shined was on power play goals. So both Caputo and Doddsy had 22 each. Donville was second to Will Malcolm with 23 goals. And then on the assist side too, it's funny, well, not even going to assists. You know, Will Malcolm broke the franchise record in our young team's history with 96 total points. But as impressive as that was, it's also pretty dang impressive that Donville was second with only 6 points less than Malcolm with 90. And he came really close to, I think, coming to Jeff Teet's rookie record for points, if I'm not mistaken. So, and this is reflected in the assist totals as well. Donville led the team with 67 assists. I think 29 of those were power play assists, which led the league. Super impressive for a rookie. And Will Malcolm was second with 61. Doddsy, Crawford, once he got to the team, Matthew Gaucher, all those guys got into the action with over 15 assists themselves. So it was nice to see the well spread around, because that definitely helped keep the defense on their toes. And both the righties and the lefties did a good job peppering the opposing goalie.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like I said, just you had mentioned it with the overall goal set differential. It's very interesting to see those games individually, because it seems like there was wide goal differential in some games, and then others is just really close. So looking at the overall, it's kind of interesting to take that information in. But of course, that is Mr. Andrew's stats of the year. Well, Mr. Andrew, you did just touch on it. There was a rookie. He had a great season. He plays for Panther City, and with that, he got the award from the NLL last week of Rookie of the Year. That is, of course, Jonathan Donville. I mean, we both kind of suspected that he would be Rookie of the Year just based on his play alone. But we had Dodds last year that could have been Rookie of the Year. He didn't get it. I mean, what do you think was the turning point for him and getting that award this year?
Honestly, I think of the three contenders, I think it was him, Jack Hanna. I don't remember who the last one was, but I feel like Doddsy might have been the only one that made the playoffs, which was a huge boon. Because I know Jeff Teet won it last year with kind of video game, as far as lacrosse video games go,
Right.
Video game numbers. But yeah, Donville, the fact that he led the league in a category with those power play assists, the fact that he scored almost as many, or he had almost as many total points as Will Malcolm, who was a legitimate MVP candidate for a lot of the season. Yeah, and all that translating to winning which it didn't quite do for Brett Dobson in goal for the Swarm or Jack Hanna for the Desert Dogs. I think that gave him the upper hand. And he did I guess we could, I don't know whether we would call him like a redshirt rookie since he was technically drafted in 2021 and decided to play another year in college.
Hmm.
But whatever the case may be, he had a really dominant season, not just as a rookie, but for any player in the league.
Well, and I think his consistent play was a big factor because he was even early on in the season, you could tell like he was going to be a big factor in the offense. But then once Crawford got there, it's like those pieces kind of fit together pretty
Yes.
good, and so that helped him just kind of take off from there. I know that was a mid-season move, but up until that point, he was putting up good numbers, and then after Crawford come in, it's almost like he kind of like I don't want to say took him under his wing, but I mean, it seems like anytime they were on the offensive side, it, things happened.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because they obviously they're both great playmakers, but they make those plays in such different ways. Crawford is a bit more they call him Showtime for a reason. And Donville seems a bit more calculating to where he'll survey the situation and then before you know it, he's caught the defense sleeping and you're getting the ball out of the net.
Right. And so, Donville getting rookie of the year. I think he even let me bring it up real quick. I think he even made the all rookie team.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all rookie team. It was him. Uh, you know, obviously Jack Hanna, Brett Dobson, Jake Bordeaux from Saskatchewan, Danny Logan from the San Diego
Mm-hmm.
Seals, and John Piatelli from the Albany Firewolves. But it just goes to show you that even though we were just an expansion team last year, we kind of cemented ourselves as something to keep an eye on, and that was even
Yes.
more so this year with not only getting into the playoffs, but I mean Donville getting Rookie of the Year, and then again, I mean he didn't win, but even Coach DK was up for Coach of the Year again.
Yeah, that would have been nice had he won it. I don't know what I was really expecting, but there's not a whole lot of expansion teams that can make it in their first couple of seasons. I mean, switching sports, your team, the Golden Knights, might have
Yeah,
done pretty well their inaugural season, but yeah, I mean, you look at the trouble some of these other younger teams have been having, like Albany and New York.
well, and
It's
even Las Vegas. I mean,
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So for us to be able to make it, it's a real testament to the culture that GM Bob Hamley and TK are building down in Fort Worth.
right. Well, and like I said, unfortunately, Coach TK didn't win Coach of the Year. There was one other person we thought I had sent you the message right when I saw it, who we thought got snubbed, and that was for Transition Player of the Year.
Yes.
And we had both thought like, okay, well, Medeiros, he's got to be a sure bet as far as like somebody who should be in the final three. He unfortunately wasn't even in the final three for Transition Player of the Year.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. And, I understand why Zach Courier won it. I mean, we saw him live. Zach Courier is an amazing player. But I would have, especially considering how many goals Medeiros was able to score out of that position. And when you look at the games that we had where he was probably number one or number two in scoring for us, his transition goals, along with Tony Malcolm as well, really helped keep us in these games where the offense wasn't necessarily clicking all the time.
Well, and not to point this out, but when your goalie is Del Bianco and tosses you passes for 3/4 of the way down the field half the time, I mean
Yeah,
that kind of gives you a little bit more of an advantage. And hey, that hats off to Del Bianco. I mean, he not only won goalie of the year, but he was up for MVP as well. So that team was just kind of a handful to begin with.
yeah,
But
and
yeah,
Kurt Malosky won Coach of the Year, so
yeah,
a lot of roughnecks up on the awards podium this year.
Right, right. Which again even shows to me like how much how much positivity we should take from our season, because we went up against this team who got all these awards, who have all these MVP candidates, and put up a really good fight against them. So
Yes.
you know, hats off to all the winners of the season. But again, we'll see what happens next year. Maybe we can go for a third rookie of the year candidate.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully. Hey, Jason Knox is coming, right? Is that his name?
Yeah,
Yeah, Jason Knox drafted fifth,
yeah.
right? A little bit above Gaucher, so we'll see
Well,
what happens.
I was about to say so yeah, he went back to the Ohio State, I believe,
Hmm.
for one more season. So he'll be starting next year, fifth pick overall this last year in the draft. But hey, you never know. With that extra year, he could probably get some good playing time and come into next year with fresh legs. But
Yeah. Yeah, certainly worked for Donville.
right, right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what changes in play happen from this year till next year. Hopefully, not a ton, but yeah, every year has its own challenges. Next year, we'll see what differences come in. Hopefully, not too much, because this year was a hell of a ride. Well, of course, the NLL had their end of the year awards. Like I said at the beginning, we decided to have our own. So for the first time ever, we present to everybody the Cowtown Cats End of the Year Awards.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, right. Where's the fanfare, the confetti, and everything like that? Uh, you know what would have made this even better, and maybe this is a good idea for next year. If we could just get all the players on the podcast. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But in all seriousness, maybe next year we can reach out to a couple more. But yeah, we start off this awards, and they're very, general awards. I know mid-season we had some funny awards here and there, but I decided to take this a little bit more seriously. So for our first award tonight, we're going to talk Defensive Player of the Year. I'll let you kick us off on this one. Who is your Defensive Player of the Year?
Well, I think there's a bit more of an obvious choice here, but little foreshadowing. I'm going to save that player for a bit later. I wanted to give some love to Captain Matt Hossack. He basically became captain almost close to mid-season, what with the Chad Cummings trade for Jake Fox. And he really did a good job helping shore up the team and keeping the defense pretty solid throughout. He led the team with 28 caused turnovers. That was more than double than the second place Panther City players. Also tied for the lead with 10 blocks and had 111 loosies. On top of that, he had, I want to say, double-digit points as well. I know he did pretty well in transition in the opportunities that he had, and he had that one goal to help get us into the playoffs against Vancouver, which, foreshadowing again, I'll go into a little bit later. But yeah, just wanted to give love for Matt Hossack. I know he's the Hossack that doesn't quite get as much love as Big Brother, but yeah, congrats, Hoss.
Hey, and that would have been a good Defensive Player of the Year. I know you mentioned about your obvious choice. I unfortunately did go the obvious choice. My Defensive Player of the Year, Nick Damude. I mean, I have an appreciation post for him. Not because not because solely of his play, but just for fun. But no, I think Damude year one to year two just seemed to fit the role better than he did in the first year. Not only that, but he learned from his mistakes as the year went on. We talked about there's two games that he got pulled, and both of those games, especially the first one, I didn't feel like he should have been pulled. I'm very much hey, you need to learn from your mistakes, and he did learn from them, but I guess I felt like he should have learned from them in the moment. But as the year went on, I felt like he just kind of got more comfortable in that, not only in the starting position, but just in the goalie position as itself. There was bumps along the way, but gosh, those last few games, especially even just like the losses that we had, he played great in some of those losses. It was kind of unfortunately the rest of the team offensively, or just the rest of the defense that just didn't help him out as much. And so for me, I just feel like he grew a lot this season, and that's why he's my defensive player of the year. Also foreshadowing he might come up again in my list as well.
Huh. Yeah,
uh,
and I remember Coach TK. I think Damien himself said that Coach TK challenged him to get in better shape and work
mhm.
on his game and everything. And his improvement from the first season to next really showed. And it was just amazing seeing him go toe to toe with guys like Dylan Ward and Del Bianco in the games we had against Colorado and Calgary.
Oh yeah, for sure, and he definitely submitted to himself also as I feel like a team leader. You know, he might
Yeah.
not be captain, but I think he was definitely a team leader with that team as a whole. So definitely a good addition that we hope that sticks around for many years to come. That is of course our defensive player of the years. Next one we have offensive player of the year. Now, my pick for offensive player year, I will say right now, is controversial, and I say that because the man didn't start the year with us. Um, I and I should have probably went with somebody who did, but I feel like without this person, there's a good chance we might not have finished the year the way we did, and we might not have made the playoffs. That's Colin Crawford. I think the addition of Showtime, even though it was sporadic, because it seemed like there was a few games he had missed for either personal reasons, or there was a few games I feel like he might have been injured and maybe didn't play at 100%. But I think he was exactly what that team needed
Yeah.
offensively to figure out what game we need to play and how we need to play it to get these kind of wins against these teams, and have that final push towards the end of the year where the games that we did need to win, we won. And with honestly, yeah, like I said, without him, I feel like we just might not have had that push that we had to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that pick at all. He was very much an offensive glue guy that could put some points on the board on his own. So, yep, I'm mad at it. However, I do think there was a pretty clear clear pick, at least statistically, for
Right, right.
offensive player of the year. Again, I mentioned that we had a pretty balanced attack, but throughout the season, the one guy that really showed that he was a leader who could put points up on the board in a hurry was Will Malcolm. And he could put them up in a hurry because he's got to be one of the fastest, quickest players in the league. He led the team with 35 goals. He finished second to Donville in assists with 61. And as said before, he had 96 points total to set a new franchise record. And I would not be surprised if assuming he sticks around, if he breaks it for years to come. On top of that, he also had 114 loose balls. So he's shown a lot of activity level, even if it's not necessarily scoring goals all the time. So yeah, he did a great job. He had a good year last year, but this year he really broke out and came into his own as a lacrosse player. So yep, I love seeing the tandem of young guys like Malcolm and Donville with veterans like Crawford and Caputo. I know Crawford's what 37 or 38, so
Yeah.
but he just lives up the road in Oklahoma, so hopefully he's with us for at least a few more runs.
Which is just really weird to think about because I'm around his age and I just feel like he's got a thousand, a million more miles than I do
Yeah,
on that body,
yeah,
which he does. But yeah, no, honestly, Will Malcolm would have been my offensive player of the year too. I said before, I felt like he kind of had more of a drop off towards the end of the year.
yeah. That's
Um,
fair.
but he he was for me the obvious choice of offensive player of the year. So I was like, I think I might go a little bit different direction with that. But speaking of Malcolm's, we come to transition player of the year, and I was gonna hop it back to you, but you mentioned Will Malcolm. I wanted to give some love to the other brother, Tony Malcolm. You know, again, probably didn't get as obviously as much play time as Will, and might not have had as big of an impact as like Medeiros or anybody like that. But I really do feel like Tony Malcolm being out there, he really did help the team as a whole. And you know, he wasn't as flashy, and he didn't get as much highlights as everybody else. But uh, that's the kind of player you need, and that's the kind of player you want. You know, somebody who's able to make that difference and help the team, and not have to have the spotlight on him the whole time. I feel like his addition this year, obviously being the brother of Will, probably helped his play, you know, elevate a little bit. But yeah, no, Tony Malcolm. I think he was there is another obvious person who is transition player of the year, but I wanted to give some love to Tony for this year. What about for
Yeah.
you?
Well, first off, that's completely fine. Tony Malcolm had a great year. He had a ton of Lucy's himself with 110, which was quite a bit more than the guy I'm going to talk to. And he also caused more turnovers as well. And he did this in two less games. So he really did have a good season. However,
Yep.
I got to go with my man, Josh Medeiros. He led the league in transition goals with 21. On top of that, had 7 assists for 28 points total. Grabbed 91 Lucy's, 12 caused turnovers, 8 blocks, showing you he's not a slouch on the other side of the goal. So the tandem of him and Tony Malcolm, it's real hard to separate those two because they make a lot of good things happen when they're both on the break running, and their eyes get big when they see that the defense isn't quite on the field yet, since the offense is kind of dilly dallying. But yeah, I got to go with Medi. I will say I probably have a Medi bias with
Yeah.
him being our. I he might be my favorite player.
Well, you know, I mean, with that smile with a tooth missing, you can't miss him. All right, but no, seriously, I mean, he was definitely the top pick for transition player of the year from Panther City. But you know that's why we have this show, so we can
Yeah,
kind of have, you know, some different picks here and there. Well, that of course brings us to what I am calling our, you know, you've heard of the sixth man award in the NBA. Well, this is the seventh man award for Panther City. You know, that extra person who might not have been a starter and might not have had all the minutes that everybody else did, but made a difference. Who do you have for your seventh man for this year?
it's tough because there were some guys that did great off the bench. I feel like Brooker Muir did great things for defense when he was in there. Evan Messenger, he might have been a starter, I don't remember, but I thought he did great things on the defensive end. On the offense, I think is where I don't want to say we needed a bit more help per se, but where it's a little bit more difficult to fill that gap. Nathan Grennan always looks great when he's out there just kind of mucking things up and getting some nice goals. But I have to give some love to who would have been Panther City's Rookie of the Year runner-up, Matthew Gaucher. He had 16 goals and 18 assists, and whenever he was in there, even though this was his first season, he seemed to always be in the thick of things. Like he might be close to the goal to get an offensive rebound for a nice putback. He might be in a scrum with three other opposing players all by himself fighting for that loose ball. So yeah, I got to give it to the goat. I can see why they call him that.
Right, right. No, honestly, for me, it's the same. We talked about him a lot this year. He is the other rookie of the year in my mind. He had really his coming out game against San Diego, where all those missing pieces were gone or out with injury,
Yeah.
and he really highlighted, like, he came out and really kept us in that game, and that really showed his worth. He really just, you know, cemented himself as that seventh man. You know, he's not going to get a ton of minutes, and he's not going to be there the whole all the time. But man, he really helped everything. He really helped the team as a whole too. Plus, he's young. I mean,
Hmm.
this is overall a young team still. I mean, yes, they have a few older people here and there, but man, like rookie, second year, you know. all playing together, and it's crazy. So yeah, Matthew Gaucher, seventh man award for sure for this year. Which kind of, I don't know if it brings us to our next one, but of course, all year we had our Cool Cat plays of the game. Well, this is our overall Cool Cat moment of the year, quote, play of the year. Um, I will say there was a lot to choose from.
Yes.
Donville to Crawford against Vancouver.
Oh,
Just
that was so good.
such a
The
great. I mean, Donville gets knocked out knocked over pretty much as he passes to Crawford, and Crawford just slips it in. Daymood had a saving goal or save against Saskatchewan where he literally just dove across and caught it, like blocked it. Even the
well,
well, yeah, I mean that was a great play, but even the fight at the end of the Colorado game, I think, should get a mention.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Jordan Gillis might get the last laugh on that, depending on how Saturday goes.
right,
But,
right.
yeah, Malcolm's dunk in the playoff game against Calgary that they had to review.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Well, that's what I mean. There was there's a ton of great plays this season. Honestly, there's too many I can think of, but for me, there was one highlight that stood out above the rest. It was that game against Philadelphia. We're tied up. 30 seconds left. Will Malcolm. That was during his where everybody was pretty much pushing him for the MVP candidate. But man, he did a juke on that Philadelphia player,
Oh yeah,
jukes him out
that's
of his shoes pretty much. I mean, juke of the century, and led to a goal, winning us that game against Philly. I I had never seen anything like it before. I haven't seen anything like it since. Will Malcolm, you are getting my cool cat moment of the year. What about for yourself?
for me. I'm gonna go a little bit more with context. And granted, that Philly game did have a lot of context to it, given that we came back on the road, and I think it brought us back to 500, right?
Yeah.
But I am going a little bit closer to the end of the season when we clinched the playoffs with our third game against Vancouver, and up in their house. The goals didn't come until the final 2 minutes to go, and they were both transition goals, which I absolutely love. Haas had one to tie it up, and then Medeiros finished the job with one of his trademark. He was probably up in the air when he shot it for us to go up by one. And then Daymute had one final stop. It probably didn't have a whole lot of a chance to go in, but just the iconic him stopping it and immediately when the buzzer sounds, getting up and celebrating because he knew what the team had accomplished. I thought that was just such a cool moment for everyone.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's moments like that that you'll remember throughout this season going into next season because it just they were special moments for sure. Well, that of course was our cool cat moments of the year, which usually would bring us to our big cat player of the game, but of course, end of the year, big cat player of the year. I'll let you hit off on this one. Who is your big cat player of the 2022-2023 season?
Well, I quasi snubbed this guy earlier, so it's only fitting that I bring him back now. Goalie Nick Daymute is my big cat player of the year. He had 624 saves on 791 shots for a stellar 79% save percentage. That was fourth in the league, only under guys like Nick Rose of Toronto, who has a very stout defense, Matt Vink of Buffalo, who's obviously in the finals playing Colorado right now, and MVP Christian Del Bianco. That's pretty nice company for a guy on an expansion team who was a bench player for San Diego before last season. So, along with that 79% save percentage, he only allowed a shade over 10 goals a game with 10.31. So, he took as big a leap as any player this season next to say Will Malcolm, and I'm looking forward to what he's got in store for the future.
Oh yeah, and like I mentioned before, so for me, big cat player of the year is Daymute as well. Without his play in some of those games, we wouldn't have made it to the playoffs. I mean, there were some of those offensive that we went against that just he shut down pretty much,
Yeah.
and that's what we needed in some of those key games. And then of course, like you mentioned just a minute ago with the moment of the year, yeah, getting those blocks against Vancouver, holding them down, making sure that we get that win, securing that playoff spot. Dude, Nick Damude, uh, yeah, I can't wait to see what happens for next year. But he is, of course, our Big Cat Player of the Year, which brings us to our final category tonight. It is the Game of the Year. Wow. I, honestly, there was a lot to kind of choose from as well in this category, mainly because you could talk about like our first game of the season, getting a win, wins against Colorado and stuff like that, or even like our big win against Vancouver. I I kind of went with the game that we didn't win. Um, it was the playoff game against Calgary, and not because like I feel like it was a game. Obviously, it's not a game that we won, but because I think we showed the league that we belong. We showed the league that we're a team that can get into playoffs and can, have a good run and can put up a fight against these teams. I mean, you forget the game before ours was that Toronto. What was it? Was it the Toronto or no? Buffalo and Rochester.
Yeah, it was one-sided.
Yeah, it
Sure.
was extremely one-sided to the point where you're like, why is this team even there? Because usually when you think playoffs, you don't think lopsided victories. You think close games, best four teams in that division, and I think that's what we showed the league. We showed everybody else, hey, don't count us out. Don't
Mhm.
don't push us aside. Don't think that we're just some kind of side team that you can get free wins off of. Yes, we struggled against winning teams this year, but in the spotlight like that, we showed that we belonged, and
And,
that was for me a huge statement.
and don't forget, we didn't have Coach TK for
Yeah,
that game either.
yeah, we didn't even have our head coach. I mean, no offense to Steve Toll, but you know, again, it just even though we kept it close, who knows if Coach TK was there and made some adjustments or said some certain things, but things might be different. But no, yeah, obviously not a win for us, but it was a highlight for me. Not only seeing the team improve like that, but then obviously with the watch party, that just even made it better. Being around people who wanted the same thing as me, so or
Yeah,
same thing as us, I should say. But yeah, that was my game of the year. What about for yourself?
yeah. And one last thing on that watch party. After that game, it was just cool being around a bunch of other fans, and we just clapped.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know if anyone could actually hear us down in Calgary, but just thanking the team for an awesome second season.
Well, I think we all understood what had happened. Like, even though we lost, and it sucked because we were hoping to get a win. uh, We knew, again, like I said before, it was a step in the right direction, and so all of us as fans were kind of proud to see our team do that.
Mhm. Indeed. Well, my game of the year was actually mentioned as a moment of the year earlier. I got to go with that comeback win over Philadelphia. That really served as a turning point in our season and got us back on track after that three game three game losing streak to go into 2023. And it had all the hallmarks of what you like to see from us. Matt Hossack had a defenseman goal in the second, no, the third, to end the third period
Mhm.
to tie the game up. We had been down, I think, 4 goals to Philly on the road, and you thought, oh gosh, is this another repeat? And we were at a little watch party of our own at the time out
Yeah.
at Boomerangs in Fort Worth. And so, yeah, well, with it being tied with 6 minutes left and no one's scoring for the next 5 minutes, then Will Malcolm does that great juke to get the defender kind of stumbling and then scores off that. And then to top things off, Josh Madero scores in transition. So it had all the hallmarks I love in a Panther City Lacrosse Club win. So I got to go with that as my favorite game this season.
Yeah, and it was it was fun watching that game, especially like you said, just in a public setting. Other people around us, other people who didn't know what was going on, who were more interested too, or got more interested.
Yes.
So yeah, watching that game was just a fun time in itself. But well, of course, talking about the game of the year as a whole, overall, it was just a fun season, I think, for both of us, especially since we were both season ticket holders this year.
Yep.
I think both of us have re-upped for next year, so we get to see this and do this all again next year.
Yes. Hopefully we get a little bit further in the playoffs. Hopefully people are a little bit healthier. Callum, don't retire just yet. You got
Yeah,
plenty left in the tank.
that's what's going to be interesting to watch this off season is see if there's any major changes player wise. Last season, we saw Thompson leave before the season started. I hope that doesn't happen with any players this year. I hope we can, you know, take the group that we have and continue to grow with who we have. Yes, Crawford, please don't retire just yet. But yeah, as the off season continues for Panther City, not only for them and see where they go in their off season activities, but be sure to look out for us as well. We're going to be doing a couple of episodes throughout the summer. We've got some great reviews over things that happen every month. Some interviews coming up, and who knows? I mean, honestly, we don't know what will lead to until next season. But we'll definitely have some shows along the way. Of course, thank you all for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And thank you for listening to our end of the year awards show tonight. Once again, I am Nicholas,
and I am end of season fancy award show Andrew.
And we'll see you all next time.
Great. Thank you. Cheers, y'all.
Thank you.